Welcome everyone to the call. This is Mark Fenner and welcome to Leading a High Performing Team. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes, right at 11:30. So make yourselves comfortable. Welcome to the webinar and we'll be getting started shortly. Okay, welcome everybody. This is Mark Fenner again, President of Rise Performance Group, and I just want to start by thanking you for attending our webinar today, Leading a High Performing Team. And before I jump into it, let me just start with a little bit of housekeeping. My executive assistant, Toby Beck, is monitoring today's call. So she's available via chat. So if you have any questions or any concerns or anything goes haywire during the webinar, don't hesitate to shoot her a message using the chat window. You'll also notice that if you have not downloaded it already, she has included a link to the workbook. So feel free to grab that, print it out. It's a great resource to take notes in today. Additionally, at the end of today's webinar, we'll be doing a Q&A. So I'll stick around a little bit for some question and answer. And there should be a button in your Zoom field that says Q&A. So if you'll click on that and submit your questions, I'll answer them at the end. I'll stay as late as you all need to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. And then lastly, before we get started, I see some friends. Ashley, it's great to see you. Cameron, Jean-Marc, thanks for joining today's call. If you just take a minute and in the chat window, just introduce yourself and where you're from and help everybody get a sense of where everybody that's joining today, where they're dialing in from, where they're watching the webinar from. You can put your company name or you can put what city you're in, but would love to see you participate and just let the community here know where you're joining us, from. Something else that would be great if you would in the chat field. What is your biggest challenge with leading a high-performing team? Said another way, what prompted you to dial in today? What is it that you'd like to see us get answered as we go through the program? I'd love to hear from you and see your questions. So Shakina, great to see you. Thanks for signing in. Shakia, good to see you. Ashley, Jean-Marc, Cameron, and others, don't be shy, but jump in on our community and let everybody see where you're from and what your questions are. So let's get rolling with today's webinar. And I want to kick this off with a story. The date was February 5th, 2017. The place was Houston, Texas. The time was 8 minutes and 31 seconds left in the third quarter. It was at this moment that the New England Patriots found themselves down 28-3 to the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 50. The chance of a comeback seemed insurmountable. The biggest comeback in the history of the Super Bowl was 10 points, and here the Patriots were down 25. How would you respond to such seemingly long odds of success? How would your team respond? Now, as many of you know by now, the Patriots indeed did come back and they won that game, and they did it in front of millions of fans. But every day in business, teams fight to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. They're just not played out on national TV, and they're certainly not played out in front of an audience who can dissect every move that the players make, as well as every decision made by the coaches. Well, welcome to Leading a High-Performing Team. My name again is Mark Fenner, and over the next 50 minutes, you're going to learn principles and strategies that will put you in position to overcome insurmountable odds and claim victory. Now, I know that what many of you are thinking right now, you're saying, yeah, but Mark, what about this year? The Patriots didn't win the Super Bowl this year, did they? And you know what? You're absolutely correct. However, the Patriots did have a chance. There's no guarantee of success. I don't care how great the principles. And the Patriots were there competing. They made it to the Super Bowl, and they were competing up until the very end. And I bet if you were building a football team, you'd love to have the systems and the mindset that the leader of the Patriots creates. In this program that we're going to go through today, will teach you the systems and the mindset that work in business. This program is designed to help you become more so you can achieve more so that you can ultimately contribute more. So let's talk specifically about what you're going to learn. So specifically, you're going to learn 3 necessary priorities that if you get these right, you're going to be met with uncommon success. Number 2, you're going to learn the keys to effective execution. How many times have you felt like you had the right strategy, you had a realistic goal or realistic outcome, but the team failed to execute on that strategy? Well, these keys will help reduce the risk of that ever happening to you again. And then lastly, you're going to learn a little known secret that will help you drive down accountability, ownership, and problem solving into your organization. Just imagine with me for a minute how much more enjoyable the ride would be if the majority of the problems and the majority of the drama were being solved by the managers and team members that are a part of your organization, freeing you to do the high leverage activities that lead to transformation. Now, the program is built on some assumptions, 2 main assumptions. Number 1, you have to have A players. You can't win without great people. And we're not going to cover that specifically in this program, but I do cover that a lot for my clients. So if you need help in this area, reach out to us. The second is that you must have the passion and the passion to win. But I know what you're thinking now, and I can hear you as you're coming through the phone. Even though you're all muted, I can hear you here. You're saying, but Mark, you don't understand. You know, I've got these entitled millennials. I've got all this finger pointing that's taken place amongst my team and maybe amongst the organization as a whole. I've got things that are breaking that are just outside of my control. And my boss or my shareholders or my board, you don't understand. They've got these unrealistic expectations. Well, what you're going to learn today will help you deal with these and many other challenges. What you're going to learn today has the power to transform your team's performance and transform your impact no matter what industry you're in and no matter what challenges you are facing. So let's get to work. So the 3 things here, the 3 priorities necessary to create a high-performing team are, number 1, you've got to create clarity. You've got to create clarity. Write this in your notes. If you haven't started taking notes already, write this in your notes. Clarity is power. Number 2, you have to ensure alignment. You got to make sure that everybody understands what they need to do to help the team succeed, and they've enthusiastically bought in. And then number 3, you've got to be willing to champion execution. Leaders find a way to win. And it's not enough to have a great plan. It's not enough to have great clarity. It's not enough to have great alignment. We as leaders have got to champion the execution that delivers the results. But if you want magic, if you want transformation in your team, then get these three right. So let's break these down real quick. First of all, we create clarity by creating pop. We create clarity by creating pop. Now, there's a lot of areas that you can create clarity, but I'm going to give you the three that'll pop your performance. Number one is purpose. So the P stands for purpose. The O stands for outcome, and the last P stands for priorities. That's what makes up pop. So let's talk about purpose. So if you haven't heard of him yet, Simon Sinek is making a fortune re-educating people on the importance of purpose. He's got a book called Start With Why. He's got a TED Talk that's one of the top 5 most popular that's ever been done, that's called How Great Leaders Inspire Action. But good companies and good leaders got this before he started his program, before Simon Sinek started his program. And I had a client, Shauna, one of my clients. We were doing a program, and we had all the leaders that were in the room, and I was sharing this idea of purpose with the team. And one of the leaders, her name was Shauna, she said, "But Mark, you know, all we do is treasury." And she no more than said that when Valerie, who ran operations, is like, "Shauna, are you kidding me?" She said, "If it weren't for what you do in treasury, you know, we wouldn't be able to deliver our clients." They were in the payroll business. Our clients' paychecks would not clear. And she no more than said that when Joel, who was in charge of sales, said, "Shauna, do you realize that in every presentation we make, we talk about the amount of money that your department manages, and we talk about the accuracy with which you do it?" In that moment, what they deliver? They delivered the sense of purpose behind what her department did. Now, great companies have got this for years. If you look at Chick-fil-A, the iconic Chick-fil-A, right? The chicken restaurant that's closed on Sundays. Chick-fil-A generates 3 times the amount of revenue per store as Kentucky Fried Chicken. Chick-fil-A does 3.1 million on average per store per year, where the average Kentucky Fried Chicken does only 960,000. How do they do it? Well, they have great employees that provide great customer service. But who are their employees? Their employees are traditionally high school kids, college students, those that are transitioning and making their way to something else in life. But what does Chick-fil-A do? Chick-fil-A sits down with every one of them and seeks to understand their hopes, their dreams, their goals. And they talk about how Chick-fil-A can serve a purpose in their journey. Their purpose is to equip and serve those kids no matter where they ultimately end up. And big companies are grasping this idea from Chick-fil-A. In fact, Deloitte Consulting, they used to be wrought with horrendous turnover because business school graduates would come in and go to work for them, but then they were looking for what's the next step in my career. Well, Deloitte finally got that, you know what, that's what they want to do anyway. Let's serve them. Let's make our purpose about serving those young adults while they're here, realizing they may go on somewhere else, but let's serve them to the best of our ability to equip them to be the best they want to be at whatever their dream is. And guess what's happened? Their turnover has gone way down and employee engagement has gone way up. So how do you find your team's purpose? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I've included in your notes a 5 why exercise. I love this exercise. I love to do it with my clients because it helps them to identify their why or their key purpose. So you'll see at the top, it says, start with what you do today, and then answer the question, why is that important? And then ask the question, why does this matter? And keep asking it until you get to the true purpose, which typically takes, you guessed it, about 5 whys. So for Shauna, it went something like this. You know, what do you do today? Well, we manage treasury. Well, why is that important? Well, so our client's payroll will clear. Well, why does that matter? Well, so they can pay their employees. Well, why is that important? Well, because if we handle it, then they can focus on the things that only they can do that are strategic. We started to get to something here. I said, so why does that matter? Well, because if they can focus on the things that are strategic, then maybe they can reach their true potential. So why is that important? Well, because if enough clients reach their true potential, then we are making an impact, and then maybe we can reach our true potential. So think of the difference in attitude that could make amongst a leader. Think of the difference in attitude that could make amongst a teammate if they go from thinking we just do our job to we're truly making an impact. We're truly putting ourselves in a position to do something special. We're truly having an opportunity to reach our true potential. So make a commitment to do this for yourself, and then turn around when you're done and do it for your team. So what's the O? So we talked about purpose. What's the O? Well, the O is outcome. Now, I've got a buddy of mine. His name is Mike. He lives in Boston, and he is a skeet shooter. And you know what? He's pretty good. He does it in the summers, almost every weekend. He goes to a competition, and he wins the majority of those that he competes in. Now, I shot a little skeet in college. I was never any good. I certainly never competed. But I told him a while back, I said, you know what, Mike? I think I could beat you at skeet shooting. And he goes, Mark, in all due respect, I don't think so. And I said, well, what if you did this? What if you came down to Dallas and we went out on the range, and I took a blindfold and I blindfolded you and I spun you around a few times, and then I started shooting skeet up in the air. How many do you think you could hit? And he looked at me, he goes, Mark, he goes, that's ridiculous. He said, how could I hit a goal or hit a target that I can't even see? And I said, you know, Mike, you know what's even more ridiculous than that is how many business leaders that I work with that are trying to hit goals or trying to hit outcomes that they cannot see. See, you cannot hit a goal you cannot see, and you cannot see a goal you do not have. And if you follow football, you know the Patriots are famous for sticking around to the very end and finding a way to win. And in football, you win when you have more points than the other team. Now, I know most of you know that, but most of us get caught up on what are my priorities? Well, we want to score 38 points. We want to hold our opponents to 21. We want to do well on special teams. And if we do that, we win the game. No, you win the game if you score more points than the other team. Those other things are priorities or small goals to get us to the big goal. But in sports, there is so much clarity around exactly what does it take to win. Let me give you an example. I've got a client that's in the healthcare. They're in the insurance business. And this particular leader manages a book of business. And I said, Scott, you know, what's your goal for the coming year? And he said, Mark, I'm excited. I think I've got a great set of goals. I said, okay, what are they? He goes, well, I manage a $10 million book of business. He goes, my goal is to renew 90% of it. I thought, you know, that's a pretty good goal. I know how tough their industry is. 100% is not realistic. I thought 90% makes sense. He goes, then we're going to take our team and we're going to do $500,000 worth of cross-selling. We're going to cross-sell another $500,000. Knowing his business, I thought, boy, that's a good goal. It's a stretch, but it's not out of line of sight. I thought that's a good goal. And then he said, lastly, he said, we're going to get 3% organic growth out of our existing base. I said, man, that sounds realistic. Sounds like a great goal. I said, Scott, let me ask you this question. I said, if you do those three things, what will that do to your book of business? He said, well, let's think about it. I got a $10 million book. If I renew 90%, that's $9 million. If we cross-sell $500,000, that takes us to 9.5. And if we get 3% in organic growth, that's another 270,000. That would take me to 9.77 million. And I said, Scott, is that good enough? Is that victory? And he gave me this look and he said, no, it's not good enough. He said, I've got to do at least 10, but we really, the company's asking for 3% growth. I need to do 10.3. So we sat down and we took the 3 levers, which became his 3 priorities, and worked on those. We picked up another little bit in retention. We picked up a little bit more in cross sales. There wasn't much we could do with the organic number, but we worked to get him to the 10.3 number that he needed to go into the year. See, what happens in most organizations is we look at goals. We have a bunch of goals, and it's okay, but there's more clarity if we have a goal. So work as hard as you can to come up with a goal, and take those small goals that you were talking about before and lever those. See if those don't make sense to use as your priorities, right? So what are the priorities or the small goals that we need to execute on to deliver the big goal? So the great thing with priorities is they create clarity, right? They give us a sense of certainty. So sometimes a bold goal will excite, but when we start thinking about, well, how are we going to get there? It can create uncertainty. But if you can bring your priorities or your small goals into focus, they create clarity. They create certainty. They give the team confidence. You know what? We can deliver on this thing. And they improve decision making. So when you come to a fork in the road, I know which way to go. Now, I can hear you thinking right now. You're thinking, man, I've got a long list of these priorities. I've got a long list of these small goals. We need to limit the small goals. The great Jim Collins said, if you have more than 3 priorities, then you probably have none. Now, if you've ever been to a circus, unfortunately the circuses no longer exist, but back in the day, you probably saw a lion trainer go into the ring, and that lion trainer probably took a stool. And if you're like me, you're probably thinking to yourself, what good is that stool? I mean, that lion could just reach around that stool and take that trainer out, and maybe, like I'm depicting in this picture, have a nice little lunch. But the stool works. And if you pay close attention, what you'll notice is those stools always have 4 legs. They have 4 legs. And you might think, so what does that matter, Mark? Why is that important? Here's why it matters. When that lion tries to focus on those legs, it's trying to look at all 4 of those different legs. And in that moment, it weakens the lion. It robs the lion of some of his or her power. Well, I know your people are smarter than a lion, and I know you're smarter than a lion. But here's my point. If we give too many priorities, if we have too many things to focus on, we weaken ourselves and we weaken our team. Do your best to get it down to 3. If you must go to 4, that's okay. 5, man, you're pushing it. Never, ever, ever, ever have more than 5. Ideally, get it down to 3. And there's an art to building these priorities. But here's a question that can help you. Here's a question that can help you. It's not in your notes. You may want to write this down. But what are the 3 things that we need to leverage, fix, or execute on that'll ensure we hit our goal? So what are your priorities? What are your priorities? So write down in your notes, if you got something that's right on your mind, write them down. And remember, now there's a lot of ways to create clarity. You're thinking, well, Mark, you haven't gotten into strategy and you haven't gotten into target market, and all these other things that we need to create clarity around. And you're right. You're right, I haven't. But the 3 I mentioned will give you some pop. They'll make major progress in your ability to lead a high-performing team. So let's talk now about alignment. Okay, so how do we ensure alignment? Well, there's 2 fundamental areas when you think of alignment that I'm going to encourage you to think about. Number 1 is, does everybody on the team know their role? Do they know what they need to do, what they need to execute on, what they're accountable for to help the team achieve its ultimate goal? And then number two is everyone on the team enthusiastically bought in. Are they all behind you, the plan, the strategy? Are they bought in? Well, let me give you some tools that are in your notebook that'll help you a little bit here. So one is this accountability system that our clients all go through. And what we ask our clients to do is on the left side, take and list out all the roles in their team. Now, if you manage a single team, if they're all salespeople, you may not have that much differentiation. But if you start to get into bigger teams with more complexity, there's probably certain things. Like in a sales team, there may be somebody responsible for prospecting, for finding new opportunities. There's maybe a team that's responsible for getting those opportunities closed. And there could be a team that's responsible for turning those new clients into diehard fans. So think about what are the different functional areas that are a part of my team. And then as you can see, what we're looking for here, once you have those, is then who is the person that's responsible for delivering on that functionality? And put a name beside all of them. And then number two is there some leading indicators or key performance indicators that we can assign so that everybody on the team knows if we're on track or off track? You know, in football, they have film session on Monday mornings. On a leadership team, we review performance on a weekly and monthly basis. And then number three, is there a profit and loss or a balance sheet item that we can associate with that really drives the accountability to our income statements? Now here's the point I want to make on this. Here's the point I want to make. There is a difference between accountability and responsibility. Everybody on the team is responsible for supporting and helping each other win. We're responsible as a team for getting the victory. But there should only be one person accountable for each of these processes. That's the person that owns the number. That's the person whose job it is to scream like crazy if there's a problem in terms of delivering in a certain area of our team. And so once you go through all this, you can start to look for, okay, do I have too many people in one seat? Or do I have one seat that has too many people in it? And then the last question to ask is, would I or would you knowing what you know today, would you enthusiastically rehire each person that you have in that role? It's a tough question. It's a fair question. What we're looking for here are A players that can help you execute your strategy. Now, here's three things that you can write down to help you think. Do I have A players? Do I really have the best? And an A player is the best of the best in your job for your comp structure within the confines of what you're doing. So McDonald's has the same A players as Del Frisco's does, right? It's a different environment. I'm looking for A players in my environment and our comp structure. But here's three things to look for. Number one, do they live your values? Number two, do they consistently wow you and the team? And then number three, do they self-lead? In other words, are they coming to you with new ideas of how to raise the bar? Or are you kind of always having to push them and then push them and push them? Or they're coming to you and saying, what next, boss? Now what? You're looking for leaders that can really help you make an impact. Okay, so we've got the right people in the roles. Now, how do we ensure that everybody has enthusiastically bought in? And in this picture, you see a guy, his name is Peter Holt. And he is the chairman and CEO of Holt Cat. They're the largest Caterpillar dealership in the world. They're part owners in the San Antonio Spurs. They're based in San Antonio, but they have a very large operation here in Dallas. And a while back, I was meeting with one of their executives, and he said, Mark, when Peter built this company, he said the first thing he did was he put his vision, he put our purpose, he put our values on a board. We made a poster for him. And he flew all over to all of our offices. And man, he just hammered home who we were as a company, why we did what we did, what drove our behavior. And he said, Mark, it was so transformational that Catapult caught wind of it. And that's why Peter was able to go on the acquisition run that he was able to go on that turned us into the largest company in the world. And I said, man, Rick, that's an impressive story. I said, man, that's awesome. I said, you know what else I've learned about when you have a strong identity around values and around purpose and around vision is it gives you something to ask people, do you buy into it? And I said, I found it especially helpful for new managers that are now promoted out of running a team and now they're leading the people that maybe they were buddies with or friends with before. And Rick, he said, Mark, he goes, no, we look at it on a completely different level. And I said, really? He goes, Mark, we don't ask, are you buying in? He said, we ask, do you enthusiastically buy in? And we're surrounding ourselves with individuals that enthusiastically buy into who we are as leaders, the outcome we're pursuing, and the plan that we're executing against. So I ask you the question, how bought in is your team to these three levers? You as the leader, the outcome you're shooting for, the plan, the culture that you're building. Now, some of you might say, yeah, Mark, how do I know if they're bought in? How do I know? And let me give you two things. Number one is your gut. And your gut tells you. And so right now, when you think about who's the most bought in, write that down on your piece of paper. And then below that, write, who do I think is the least bought in on my team? Or who do I think maybe is not bought in at all? The second way is to use a powerful question. And the question is to ask your teammates on a scale of 1 to 10, how bought in are you to me as your leader, to our outcome that we're shooting for, and to our plan? And I love the 1 to 10 because it gives some granularity to the answer. It's not as a binary as are you enthusiastically bought in, yes or no. And a 10 is you're enthusiastically bought in, 1 is you'd rather be out of here. But there's magic in the question. And when you hear a 7 or you hear a 6 or even an 8, even a 9, the question is, so what would it take for you to be a 10? It's a powerful, powerful question. And that question and that process will get people bought in. You'll know who's on board and who you can trust and what you need to do to get those that are on the fence over the hump. Now, some of you are saying, yeah, but Mark, I've got some people. I already know who they are and they're not bought in. So what do I do? Well, I'm glad you asked because I'm gonna give you an answer. We have a tool called the intentional conversation. And this is a powerful, powerful tool. I'm going to include it as a follow-up to this in the follow-up email we send you. I've got a blog and some videos on it. This tool alone has helped my clients build high-performing teams at a pace that they're like, why didn't we know this and why weren't we doing this before? So here's the intentional conversation. Take this person that your gut is telling you is not bought in and ask for, you guessed it, an intentional meeting. So it's not as part of your one-on-one. It's not while we're at lunch. It's an intentional meeting. So Joe, hey, it's Mark. I'd love to sit down and visit with you about a few things tomorrow. What's your schedule like in the afternoon? Let's schedule a meeting. Okay, it's an intentional conversation. Number 2, when you meet with them, you kick the meeting off by paying 3 compliments. Now, some of you are saying, Mark, you don't know these people I'm dealing with. There's not 3 things to compliment. And I want to caution you against that thinking. You know, if I took my pen, if I took my red little Rise pen and I drop it, it falls every time it falls. And that's an analogy because when we look at people, it takes no effort to see what's wrong with them. Anybody can see what's wrong. The difference is leaders see what's right. leaders can find that nugget of gold. And by the way, this process works with people on your team. It works with your peers that you need to have bought in to you and your approach. And it works even with your boss. I love this question. I've coached more leaders to go have this discussion with their boss, and it's got transformational results. So pay 3 compliments. Then the question is, so what's the issue? So the transition is, so Joe, listen, I love your passion. I love how you always speak up in the meetings. I love that you're resolute in your opinions. But here's the transition. But Joe, I just feel like you're not 100% enthusiastically bought in. So you're making it about you, not about them. This significantly reduces the risk that they get defensive, which is, we don't want them defensive, right? We want them to lean in. We want to work. We're a leader. We want to get them bought in and executing in their job. So start with the 3 compliments, transition into the issue, and then listen. So Joe, you know, I just feel like you're not completely committed. I just feel like you're not enthusiastically bought in. And then listen. Now, one of 2 things are going to happen. Either one, they're going to deny it. Well, I don't know what you're talking about, Mark. Well, if they deny it, then you need to be prepared with an example of the behavior you're talking about. So it might go something like this. Well, Joe, I just noticed in yesterday's meeting, when we were talking about the importance of all of us thinking outside the box to help us get to the goal, I noticed that you just kind of crossed your arms and kind of looked up into the sky. It just felt to me like I was losing you. And then zip. Typically, that's all you need, and then they come clean. The other example is they come clean right from the moment. And if you call the intentional conversation and they're not bought in, they know what's going on. So most of the time, they're going to come clean. Now, most people, the reason they're not bought in is they don't feel respected, they don't feel like they're given autonomy, and they don't feel like they're trusted. Those are the 3 big reasons. But no matter what they come back with, you want to say, is there anything else? Is there anything else? Is there anything else? And sometimes their list is short. Sometimes their list is long. Either way, it doesn't matter. When you get to the end of the list, when they say, no, Mark, there's nothing else. No, Mark, that's it. Then here's the magical question. Summarize what they said and then ask this question. What do I need to do? What do I need to do to get you enthusiastically bought into what we're doing? No matter how long the list, summarize it, demonstrate you've heard, and then ask the question, and then close. Well, Mark, I just feel like I need to be heard more. I feel like I need to be valued more. I'd like my opinions listened to a little bit more. Okay, so what do I need to do to make that happen? Well, it would help if in the meetings when I make an idea, if you show sincere interest in it. Okay, so if I do that, then can I count on you to be enthusiastically bought in? Yes, that's what you're looking for. Now, some of you got to negotiate a little bit sometimes. Sometimes it's not as easy as my little role play right here, but that's why you're leaders. That's why you were promoted and why you're in the job you're in. Now, one more thing on this topic is your culture. Think of what happens when somebody has a problem with somebody. So something doesn't get delivered, the handoff's rocky, something's not right. Do they go to the person or do they go to the person's boss? Think about what you see happening most common. And if they go to the person's boss, and you may be the boss, so they may be bringing it to you, is that the best use of your time? And does that build a culture of teamwork and trust and joint accountability and commitment towards our goal? No, it doesn't. I had a prospective client the other day told me it creates the Bermuda Triangle in our organization. It takes ideas into the abyss. So what you want to do is you want to teach your team this power of the intentional conversation. Get them having these discussions themselves so that these ideas aren't hitting your radar. You're driving that accountability. You're driving decision-making, problem-solving down in your organization. So who do you need to have an intentional conversation with? You know who that person is. Your gut is probably right. Write it down in your notebook and commit at the end of this workshop to get that scheduled and go have that intentional conversation. If you want to call me beforehand, I'm happy to help you, but it has the power to transform your relationships and the influence in your team. Okay, so we talked about alignment. We talked about ensuring everybody knows their role. We talked about the importance of everybody enthusiastically buying in. And we gave you a strategy, if you don't have everybody bought in, how to get them bought in. Let's talk about championing execution. This is the last of the big three priorities. And remember, leaders find a way to win. So how do we champion execution? Well, number one, we create momentum. Number two, we control focus. And number three, we build a cadence. So let's unpack these a little bit. Number one, momentum. Momentum is magic. If you take this train and you think about how much energy it takes to get that train up to 40 miles an hour, and you compare it with the amount of energy it takes to keep it at 40 miles an hour, it's not even close. But here's the power. If that train is stopped on the tracks, I can probably take a little 1x2 and put it, chalk it underneath its wheels, and that thing's stuck. It probably can't even get over a little 1x2. But if I get that train up to 40 miles an hour, I could erect a concrete wall, and boom, that train would probably plow right through that wall. That big wall wouldn't even stop that train. So what does that mean? That means when you lack momentum, even little itty bitty small problems can stop you and stop your team. But when you've got momentum, even big problems don't faze you. So the question is, how do we create momentum? Glad you asked. The first thing we need to do is we need to connect. The second thing we need to do is we need to find. And the third we need to do is we need to control. So what do we connect with? Well, we connect with purpose. Here it is. Here's that purpose thing again. Purpose is a huge lever to help you generate the massive action that is the mother of all momentum. We need to find quick wins. Pursue what is easy. Get to winning. Success breeds success. Save the bigger challenges for when you've got momentum. Wait to go through that concrete wall until you've got momentum. And then number three, control the meaning. Any major goal, any major initiative is going to be met with losses. It's going to be met with setbacks. Let those losses refine your team, not define the team. Remember, sometimes we win and sometimes we learn. So focus. Number two, focus on what you can control. So if you think at any given time, there's three things that we can be focused on. One is what's in our control, two is what's in our influence, and three is what's out of our control. The challenge is, if you go back to my gravity analogy, gravity forces people to most commonly focus on what's out of their control. That's where most people want to focus. Our job as leaders is to bring them back to what's in their control. So I build sales teams. So salespeople, what's in our control? Well, number one, the number of meetings you hold, the number of new people you meet. Number two, the quality of your ability to present your message. And number three, the quality of the prospects that you choose to call on. What's in your influence, whether or not you get the business. What's out of our control, what our competitors do, what's going on in the economy, what management decisions and things the company can do. But here's what I have found. I have found that if you will work hard to focus on what's in your influence, that ring grows. And as that ring grows, focus on what's in your control. As that grows, what's in your influence grows, and what's out of your control becomes very small. And this point was made to me by a friend of mine. His company makes deli sandwiches for 7-Eleven. And he said, Mark, when we first started, he said, we would be impacted by the weather. If it was a cold day in Dallas, guess what? We didn't sell too many deli sandwiches. But what we learned was we could learn to anticipate the weather. We created a feed that would bring the weather feed into our production facility, and we would anticipate what the weather was going to do, and we would shift our product mix. And so what I have found is that as as what you focus on grows and your influence grows, you learn to anticipate the things that are out of your control. Write this in your notes. Anticipation is power. If we can learn to anticipate, and that happens when we stay disciplined on what's in our control and let what's in our influence happen, and we don't get distracted. In fact, the art is in focusing on what we can control, trusting what is in our influence, and avoiding being distracted by what is out of your control. If you go back to my New England Patriots story, every bounce of the ball seemed to be going the Atlanta Falcons' way. At halftime, the Patriots were dejected. Their players were losing faith. But if you watch Tom Brady and you watch Coach Belichick, Bill Belichick on the sidelines, they kept harping, focus on what we can control. If you read their lips as they went up and down the sidelines to the players, focus on what's in our control. We can't control what's going on. I know it seems like we're down insurmountably. Keep focused on what we can control. And let's trust that we're going to get a break. If we do what's right long enough, we'll get a break. And maybe we'll get a chance to get back in. And guess what happened? That's exactly what they did, and it worked. Let's talk about cadence, meeting cadence. So cadence means there is a rhythm coupled with tight objectives for the meeting. So a cadence that works. If you want to transform execution, if you really want to move the needle, put a cadence in place of daily huddle, weekly tactical, monthly or quarterly strategic. So it goes something like daily, 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 weekly, 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 monthly, 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 quarterly. Now let's talk about what we do in these meetings. Before I lose you, hang with me here. Hang with me. Hang with me. You're thinking, how do I do more meetings, Mark? I'm already slammed. How do I fit this in? Hang with me for a minute. The daily huddle is a 10-minute stand-up meeting. 10-minute stand-up. Don't even sit down for this meeting. But it should be about a critical number. If you lead a big team and you've got a war room, it'd be ideal to go into the war room with all your numbers on the wall. But it could be about a critical number. Or it can be about what's up and where you stuck. But it moves quickly, right? 10 minutes, in and out. Put an egg timer, 10 minutes, in and out. The weekly is a tactical. And I would design this based on the needs of your team. But a good place to start is to have your team come to that tactical and present. The team presents. If you look on my slide, 80% of the time you as the leader are listening, 20% of the time you're talking. That means your team's doing the bulk of the talking. So what do they talk about? Well, in the weekly tactical, we're going around, what are your top 3 accomplishments from the last week? What we're doing is we're teaching them to focus on getting things done. We're teaching them to focus on results. Number 2, what are your top 3 priorities for the upcoming week? What we're teaching them to do is to prioritize. We're teaching them to anticipate. Remember I told you, anticipation is power. If you tell them, hey, we're going into spring, in spring, our business, or hey, we're coming up on the end of the quarter. If you've got to tell them that, then they're not thinking for you. You do not have A players. So you can listen and you can say, are they talking about the fact it's the end of the quarter? Are they talking about the fact that we're going into spring and the impact that has on our business? And if you don't hear what you think you should be hearing, then you can coach, and you can coach where there's been some space created and everybody's listening. And it makes your coaching more effective. Number 3, the third powerful question is, what, if anything, could get in the way of you delivering on your priorities? And what you're teaching them here is anticipation. You're teaching them intuition. The monthly or quarterly, different departments. I like monthly and I like quarterly. I like to split those two, but these are more strategic. So this is, let's take a step back, let's reflect, and let's say, how did I do against my plan? What are the lessons that I've learned? And what's my commitment for the next period? And if we have time, let's pick one strategic issue that everybody comes to the meeting prepared to help us solve to move the organization forward. The problem in most weekly meetings is that's where we get off track. Somebody brings something up and we waste the meeting talking about things that people aren't prepared for, and so it can become drama. This structure will save you time. It will create clarity. It will create culture. It drives focus. It helps you keep the main thing, and it improves communication. But most importantly, pay attention to me here, is it can create a culture of high performance. Now, Google, I'm going to send you a link to this in the follow-up email, but Google did a survey of teams. It was back in 2011 when they published their findings. But they found certain teams perform better than others, no matter what the project. And it caused them to think, what's the difference? And here's what they found. They found that the teams that performed the best created something that they called psychological safety. Psychological safety. You think, Mark, what the heck does that mean? Well, what that means is that the team members feel safe taking risk in expressing ideas and feelings. And the way they said the primary strategy to make that happen is conversational turn taking. They said as long as everyone on the team got a near equal chance to talk, the team did well. But if only one person or a small percentage of the team dominated the conversation, the collective intelligence of the team declined. And I can validate this research because I've seen it play out so much with my clients. They'll say, but Mark, if I ask everybody to speak in my meeting, it's going to be a pretty short meeting because nobody speaks up now when I say who's got questions. And you know why they're not speaking up? They don't have that psychological safety. They're not sure. Are they going to be judged? What if they say something stupid? All these fears are going through their minds. Those fears weaken your team. As you get more and more comfortable with this format, pretty soon you're getting all kinds of vigorous debate that's taking place amongst your team members. They're solving problems. They're coming together. This alone can make a huge impact on the performance of your team. And the other thing is, as a leader, if you don't do this kind of meeting, because some people say, well, Mark, I cover this in my one-on-one. Here's what you're missing if you do this in your one-on-ones. And one-on-ones are important. You should be meeting with each team member at least twice a month. But here's what you give up. You give up peer pressure. Your team members, whether you like it or not, they will do more to look good amongst their team than they will to look good for you. Number two, you're missing the collective intelligence of the team. And number three, you're giving up on the opportunity for that clear communication to confirm that we're wrapping up Q1, to confirm that we're going in to spring. Well, we've covered a lot so far. We've talked about the 3 priorities. We've talked about the 3 keys to execution. There's one small little secret that I want to put a bow on this program around. And that is, how do we drive that accountability, that ownership, that problem solving down closer to the front lines? How do we move it closer to the problems where it's best to be taken care of anyway? And number one is we create a cadence of having your team. So instead of you telling them what you need done, ask them to commit to you what they're going to do. It's a shift. Commit to you. What are you going to do? Number 2, report on how they performed against plan. Number 3, give them time to reflect. In today's fast-paced texting, iPhone, all this stuff beeping in the night at us, we're losing our reflection time. And as leaders, build it into our process. If we want to bring that habit back, build it into our process. Build a cadence around it and repeat. So what does this look like? This means once a month or once a quarter, your team is taking a look at what they got done. They're reflecting and they're thinking about what they got done last month or last quarter. They're committing to what they're going to do in the upcoming quarter. And they're talking about what they need to do to change in their approach or in their plan to deliver the result. Remember, your goals or your outcomes should be cast in concrete. The strategy can be cast in sand. I mean, if we got to change our strategy to get to the result, fine. Just don't give up on the outcome. Don't give up on the result. And the beauty is the faster you can cycle, the faster you can scale. So do me a favor, type in the chat bar, what are you taking away with? What have we talked about that you can apply when you get back to your office? What are some things that you can take action on that we've talked about today? Do me a favor and put those in the chat bar. We've talked about 3 necessary priorities. We've talked about 3 keys of execution. And we talked about this secret that can drive down ownership, accountability, and problem solving. It's that cadence. You put that cadence in place, and it can make a huge impact on the performance of your team. Now, as a follow-up, we're going to send you an email, and in it is an opportunity for you to take an organizational health assessment. And you can go to our website. We'll give you a link. You can put your team members in there. We'll send them a survey. And it's got a handful of questions that are built around 7 key areas. And you'll get a spider graph back like this with some commentary on where's your team today and where should you focus if you're looking at taking your team to the next level. So let's open it up for some Q&A. Again, if you have not done so already, please go to the Q&A tab and submit some questions. Now, I know that some of you are going to have to run. We're close to the bottom of the hour. I'm going to stay on until all the questions are answered. And so if you do have to run before we're done, I want to thank you for taking the time to be a part of our program today. I'm here to serve you. So any questions, you can shoot them to me. If you're not comfortable in the Q&A, shoot them to me via email. Pick up the phone and call me. My phone number will be in the email. But I'm here to serve you. So if I can be a resource, please take advantage of it. So Toby was asked a question, and I think these might have come in through the Q&A, or they might have come in from those that asked before we started the program. But her first question is, I have heard a lot about Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. How does your model compare? And that's a great question. I'm glad whoever asked it, I'm glad you asked it. And Patrick Lencioni's model is really becoming the industry standard. So if you have not picked up his book, if you've not really analyzed his model, I highly recommend it. We are creatures of habit. And I know personally that it took me a while to focus on what I can control, learn to trust what's in my influence, and avoid being distracted by what is out of my control. And the one thing that has helped me the most was using questions, using the power of questions to control my focus. And I found that that if you can use that power of questions of what do I need to do to build more trust in my team? What do I need to do to, when you go around the room and you ask people to submit to you, what they got done last week, what are their top priorities for this week, you're building that psychological safety net like we talked about. And if you'll do a good job of creating that in your team, then you're going to have a higher probability of building that trust. And I would highly recommend going through Patrick's materials as well. And if you have an interest in that, that is certainly something that we can help you with. Another good question here. How will I find time for another meeting in the day when everyone is already so busy that they can't get everything done? Well, this is another great question. And once your meetings are effective, you're going to find that they're going to buy back time for you in your calendar. The additional focus, the reduced wasted energy, and your presence will inspire the team with more intentional action, and the planning for the meeting will create new habits. So if you think about that, the challenge today is we're like, a lot of us are like ping pong balls in a ping pong ball machine, because we're being hit with different stimulus all the time. So the process of going through that reflection and really thinking through, what am I learning? What strategies are working? What do I need to shift in my strategy to be more effective? Will help you build a stronger team and will help buy back time, will help reduce the number of questions that you deal with throughout the day, allowing you to be more effective. Good questions here. Good questions. Let me see. What is the relationship between culture and high-performing teams? So I'd like you to think about culture as a magnet in your organization. It's like a magnet, and it has the power to pull people up to the best version of themselves. It also has the power to pull people down. And there's no power. What I have found is there's no power in human psychology greater than our need to be consistent with the expectations of our peer group. So if our peer group is high, we will work hard to live up to those expectations. Again, if our peer group is low, very few people, now some will, but very few will rise above the expectations of the peer group. So our challenge is to create culture. It really all revolves around culture. The meeting format, if you'll work to implement that meeting format, if you'll get clarity around the outcomes, if you'll ensure you have team members that are bought in, and when people aren't bought in, don't tolerate that. If you've got people that aren't bought in, you need to get them to a different job or to a different company, because they will serve as rotten apples that'll pull your culture down. But if you'll do the pruning and the development that's necessary, and you'll put a cadence in and how you run things, you're going to watch your culture shift. And you're going to watch performance in your team rise. And what you're going to find then is that you can do more of the things that only you can and should do. Work strategically on the strategy. Coach and develop your people. Inspire them to reach for greater heights. So great question. The culture question is fantastic. Here's a question: how to embark a team that does not directly report to you and fears the change and potentially added work at the beginning if they embark on an initiative. Boy, I should always assume somebody in the audience is going to ask me a tough question. So a couple things that I would recommend. People will support that which they help to create. People will support. They're going to be more likely to support that which they help create. So how can you make the vision about them? So a strategy that I've used with many of my clients that has been very effective is we'll start off with an exercise of why must we change and what are the barriers to us changing. And I love to do this exercise. It gets people involved. But if you ask people why we must change and you put them in small groups, oftentimes they'll come up with great ideas, great reasons why change isn't just something we should do, but why we must do it. And what you'll find is when you go through the barriers, a lot of times the barriers are all fear of change related. You'll see a trend in there. Then number two, ask them, if we're going to change, what should that outcome look like? Create that clarity around what is that desired state. Now, you may have an idea in your mind what you want that desired state to be, but facilitate them coming up with their ideas. And if you have specific questions, I can help you in this area of how to use really targeted questions to come up with what that vision would be. And then I would have them work as a team to develop the priorities and the projects around how we do that. And in a way that I've done that's really been effective is have each team member give them 3 Post-it notes and say, write down what are the top 3 things that we need to do to make this objective a reality. and have them write them on their sticky notes, one on each note. And then have them come up and paste those on the board at the front of the room. And then get a volunteer to come up and take those notes at the front of the room and organize them into logical groups. And what you're going to find is oftentimes they'll organize them into 3 or 4. Sometimes you'll have kind of an abstract group that doesn't fit anywhere, but get them down to 3 or 4 key priorities that we need to focus on to deliver that outcome. So number 1, get their mindset ready by change with the change example that I talked about. Why must we change and what are our barriers? Number 2, get them to come up with what the new outcome should be. What should that look like? And then number 3, get them to buy in. What should the priorities be to deliver on that outcome? Great question. Thank you for asking. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, great job. Great job. Thank you very much for attending. It's truly a privilege to serve you. Continue to rise up. Continue to lead with passion. And don't hesitate. Click on our link. Reply to the email. If I can be a resource at all, I'd love to serve you. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.